All right, so like many people, I've been thinking for quite a while about why is it that identity politics have surged within the last decade or so. Is it just a coincidence that it correlates with the rise of social media's ubiquity? Uh, so lately, given documentaries like The Social Dilemma becoming popular, and with social media corporations like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube coming under fire for invasions of privacy, censorship, and the spread of so called fake news, skepticism and concern about the role of social media has been growing. Another concern is that a lot of social media, being both an echo chamber for ideas ranging anywhere from absolutely bonkers, like the earth being flat, to dangerous, like the QAnon conspiracy, as well as the effect that social media has on people's mental health with things like FOMO, the fear of missing out, to stalking, to rising rates of anxiety and depression. Social media, particularly with 24/7 access thanks to smartphones, is an addictive activity pushed on people from an early age by algorithms meant for nothing more than to earn profits for stockholders. It's bordering on cliche these days to talk about how if you are not paying for a product, then you are the product. Social media sites are almost all quote unquote free to use, but the unseen cost is your data, which are used to sell targeted personalized advertisements. People are making money off of our addictions. Another effect, though, which maybe isn't talked about as much, is what I'm going to call the rise of identity economics. So, to clarify, identity politics is the use of identity and identity groups for political activism and special interest lobbying. For instance, the male female dimorphism is not just a set of biological facts, but is instead imbued with political meaning and studied through the lenses of things like postmodernist power dynamics and critical theoretical disruption. So, in other words, political goals take center stage. This also applies to things like race and sexual orientation and gender identity and a host of other so-called intersectional identities. Of course, identity has been important to people for longer than the rise of identity politics within the past few decades. Two things, though, seem to be required for identity: cultural, socioeconomic, sexual, and so on, to rise to the level of identity politics. Number one, relative affluence, and number two, inter-identity contact. So the first requirement just means that people must be allowed time and energy to concern themselves with issues above mere subsistence. Hunter-gatherers and peasant farmers, for instance, from what can be garnered from the historical records, didn't really occupy themselves with the complexities of identity and authenticity like we do nowadays.
And that's because in tribal societies, carrying on the views of your elders often was a matter of survival. There was a reason there were things like taboos. The Apache Indians in the old days didn't eat fish. And historians have suggested that maybe the reason why is that once upon a time the tribe did eat fish and a lot of people got sick and died, so they created a taboo that said, no eating fish. You didn't often get young Apache leaders arising that said, "To hell with you, old man, we're eating fish."
The second requirement, though, is what causes a person to become conscious of their identity. Being challenged with the existence of alternative beliefs and behaviors causes someone who satisfies the first requirement to reflect on their own beliefs and behaviors, oftentimes being forced to navigate cognitive dissonance and the evolutionarily instilled desire for social cohesion. Diversity of beliefs and behaviors is messy and complex, but humans seek stability and predictability. Bringing these two ideas together, the effect social media has on people and are satisfying their requirements for identity politics, brings us to the idea of identity economics. No longer are we bound together by mutual need and reciprocity. Instead, we find various identities to bind ourselves with others. We humans now worry about our so-called brands. Nobody requires each other the way our evolutionary forebears did for survival. And so now we must advertise ourselves to each other by a different means. Uh, our brand, essentially. So saying something like, you should like me because I bring X, Y, and Z to the table. Different people will fill in these variables with different things, perhaps money or sensual pleasures, you know, things like music or visual or things like that. Social prestige, feelings of happiness or belonging or meaning. Me as a brand will tell you things you like and promise to continue doing so. You buy my brand with subscriptions, likes, retweets, and so on. So a lot of times this is called virtue signaling, but virtue signaling is really something more. Virtue signaling isn't so much to signal virtue as to advertise our brand. Our identity is the product, and the virtue signaling is the advertisement. And so we end up with people putting their Hogwarts house in their bio to advertise that they're the type of particular person with this particular interest. We include our gender pronouns not only to show that we're woke enough to care about such things, but also to say what group we belong to, and that if you subscribe to me, you are purchasing that identity. Or at least you're purchasing an identity that says you subscribe to people of my identity. But identity economics goes beyond just cultivating a certain online network. The identity economy is inexorably entwined with the real economy, that of goods and services. We buy the products and experiences that coincide with our personal brand, with our identity. We say things like, I'm the kind of person who wears metal band t-shirts and goes to metal festivals. Or, I'm the kind of person who wears hats with ears on them and goes to anime conventions. Or, I'm the kind of person who dyes my hair blue and makes videos about being gender fluid. Or, I'm the kind of person who wears MAGA hats and protests mask wearing. Or, I'm the kind of person who buys a new phone every year and yet protests capitalism. Or, I'm the kind of person who buys clothes with dour taglines and talks about my mental illness as an identity, and so on. So, one problem I foresee is that these identities, because they're just a consumer brand essentially, are fleeting and do nothing to really satisfy our desire for meaning and community. Many people likely use things about themselves that are authentic as a brand, looking inward and thinking, I'm this, so how do I monetize it or use it for more social status? The fact that they truly are in such a way will only add further authenticity to their brand. However, I think there are many others who, feeling lonely or empty, will latch on to some identity as a poor substitute for a substance. These people will likely abandon such identities in the future, feeling even more empty and alone, particularly after being outcast from their identity community. Even the people who use their genuine identity as their brand will likely find this an ephemeral, substitute for sincere human contact. Just look at all the Hollywood stars, YouTubers, and influencers, and so on, who, despite their success, at least measured by the metric of subscribers and followers, talk about they're uh, how they're full of mental illness and how they're burned out from doing what they're doing. Uh, Being a brand, I guess, just it doesn't fill that void left by our evolutionary need for social belonging and purpose. So you must be wondering if the irony of releasing this as a video is lost on me, but it's because of that need, that feeling I have for making videos at all, that I'm even making this. I make it because I've started making a YouTube channel, and I couldn't help but wondering, what's my brand? This was an alien and possibly alienating thought to me. I already felt the need to accumulate subscribers and views and likes. I mean, why else would I even be bothering to make these videos? I like to think that I do it, at least as far as my videos about science are concerned, to help make the world a better place. Someone might stumble upon my videos and become interested in science, and maybe that'll make them want to turn it into a career. Or maybe somebody just comes along and they find my videos and they learn something about nutrition, and they can use that knowledge to better themselves. But it was when I decided to start making reaction videos to songs and music videos and so forth that it really struck me that views and subscribers are important to me for whatever reason. I was sucked into the vortex of the identity economy. I'm not an animated person, and I don't really react strongly to things. You can probably tell that I'm really not that good at just talking, well, you know. And to be honest, I found that I don't necessarily even really enjoy reacting in front of a camera. And so I'm not that good of a candidate for making reaction videos. But I knew that reaction videos often pulled in views and relatively quickly. So I was drawn to it for maybe cynical reasons, but hey, you know, given that I call myself the Cynical Philosopher, maybe that's on brand, am I right? Anyway, I was having these thoughts, and so because I'm as much of a stooge of the identity economy as anyone else, I decided to share these thoughts with all of you in hopes that this will elevate my brand. So please like, comment, and subscribe.
I hope I'm the first person you call. I'll listen like a pistol. It'll be worse than talking to a wall. Having everything's having nothing at all. I watch you climb your way to the top, and I'll still be here when you fall. There's no fulfillment in a lazy nation that keeps feeding our infatuation with the idea of being famous. Fill me up, fall in love. We are America's favorite choice of drug. It's all in your hands, kill us while we're young. You don't need to push me, I'm ready to jump. Break me down, wake me up. We are America's favorite choice of drug. It's all in your hands, kill us while we're young. And don't fucking push me, I'm ready to jump.